Hey guys, all right. So it's almost go time. All right. I'm really confident that if you've been doing what you should have been doing and following along and completing the assignments and watching the videos, we should be in really really good shape this year, especially with the changes made for this year's exam. All right. So you should be very confident, but you got to look yourself in the mirror, and you're the only one who knows if you've really been doing the work, watching the videos, if you've just been looking up answer keys and plugging stuff in, or just getting the answers from somebody else and making it look like you're doing your work. That if you've been doing it that way, that's all on you. And again, I do believe that that's a way that you can learn by just getting the answer key and really thinking about it. But you got to really be thinking about it, not just copying stuff. All right. So one of the ways we would review on any normal year around this point is I basically go through and give you a list of all the important graphs and charts and situations that you could ever possibly see on a multiple choice or need to sketch. Okay, so I'm going to just reverse it a little bit this year, since you're not going to have any multiple choice and you're not going to have to sketch anything, right? I'm assuming that they're going to show you some kind of sketch and ask you what you know about it and what it means, and what if this happens and things like that, right? So I'm going to go through. I have my list of ones that I would normally say, you draw it. Okay, now here's what it should look like. Now you draw this one. Now here's what it should look like. So I'm just going to pause, put up a sketch. You should look at it and think, okay, that is obviously supply and demand when there's a price ceiling, or that is obviously a production possibility frontier when there is increasing opportunity costs, or that is obviously a monopoly being regulated to produce at the socially optimal point, the allocatively efficient point. All right, so let's jump right in. I'm just going to jump around and see what we get. Okay, what do you see? You can pause and think about it if you want. Right, but what you're looking at there is, let's look at the clues. Right, marginal revenue is falling underneath demand. Okay, if marginal revenue is falling underneath demand, it can't be perfect competition. It's got to be one of your imperfect competitions. Right. So if that's the case, it could be any of them, unless I told you that this is in long run equilibrium. If it's in long run equilibrium, that means that this has got to be monopolistic competition, because the ATC is tangent to the demand curve at the optimal spot for them. All right, their optimal output is always marginal revenue hits marginal cost. They're just breaking even in the long run because of free entry and exit into the market. Okay? They have excess capacity because they're not at the low point of the minimum point of their ATC. Okay? They could be producing more, right? But they're not. So they're not allocatively efficient, and they're not productively efficient. Okay? They're neither. But they are like perfect competition because they're just breaking even, right? Their total cost and their total revenue is the same, right? And the price per unit that they're getting is exactly equal to the cost per unit of producing. Okay, so that's monopolistic competition and long-run equilibrium. Let's see what we get next. Hey, and also, guys, what I really think you should do is get yourself some paper, copy each one of these, right? Write down what it is, any comments I make about it that you don't automatically have popping into your head once you see it, and then have the cheat sheet I gave you, have your calculator, whatever else you think would be helpful to have handy, right? Have all that right there. Again, don't waste time going around and Googling stuff or going to social media once you see the questions tomorrow. Between these sketches that I'm going to give to you today, the last, half dozen FRQs that we've practiced, and that cheat sheet, that really should be everything that you need, right? And everything else should be up here. Okay, so here's the next one. What is this? These are all the different cost curves, right? What are they? Well, we've got Mr. Cool marginal cost, which is usually going to be the Nike swoosh, right? So it starts off going down. because of specialization, but then because of diminishing returns, it starts to increase, right? And that's the one that everybody wants to be like. It's the one that always trying to be cool. ATC is getting pulled down because of the marginal, and so is always vainly attempting to be cool. ABC, right? Um, Wherever marginal cost is, that's if it's below, they're both coming down, and if marginal cost is above, they're both coming up, right? Because again, that marginal is the next one. Think about how we said about averages, right? And marginal being the next one. So if your average is a 90 and you get a 92 on the next exam, that's the marginal exam, your average is going to go up. If your average is 90 and you get an 80 on the next exam, your average is going to go down, right? So whatever the marginal is doing, that's where ATC or ABC is going. And the one that doesn't care is always doing its own thing, already effing cool. That's your average fixed cost. It's going down as quantity goes up because you're spreading a certain amount of cost out over more and more and more units of production, right? Which is why also your ATC and ABC are continuously getting closer because the space between them is your average fixed. So as that gets lower, the space between average total and average variable costs start to get closer and closer, right? One more note on this one. Well, marginal cost is below both of these, right? The spreading effect is dominating. That's why it's pulling them down. After they hit marginal cost at both of their minimums, they start to increase, right? And that's because the spreading effect is still in play, but now the diminishing returns effect is stronger. Okay, so those are all your cost curves. Okay, what do you got? Well, it's a minimum price, right? If it's a minimum price, you're stopping the price from going any lower where it wants to go. So what stops you from going down is the floor, right? That is a price floor. Price floor will always, if it's binding, it's effective, which means if it's set above equilibrium price, if it's set down here, it doesn't matter. It's not binding. The price is going to stop on its own. So what do you always have? You always have, if it's binding, you have your quantity supply greater than your quantity demand, right? And that is a surplus. Okay, so just don't get confused about where it is. A lot of times kids will make the mistake, it's on top, so that means it's a ceiling. No, it's not about where it is, it's about what it does. It stops the price from coming down, so it's a price floor, right? And it results in a surplus. How much of a surplus? That much. Whatever the change in quantity is between those 2 points. The higher you set it, if you set it here, the greater the surplus. Okay? And again, it's going to create surplus, and it's not efficient, and blah, blah, blah. Okay, see what we got. Pause. Nope, not pause. Okay, what do you got? This is a PPC or a PPF, a production possibility curve or production possibility frontier. And what's unique about this? You have constant opportunity cost. Okay, however many socks you give up each time you increase a certain number of scarves, right? It's the same trade-off every time, whatever that trade-off is, right? If one scarf costs you 2 socks, the next scarf will also cost you 2 socks, and the next sock will cost another 2 socks, and it's always a constant trade-off, which means your resources are equally suitable, right? Interchangeable for making socks or scarves. That's why I pick socks and scarves. They're probably both made out of wool or cotton or whatever. So it makes sense, and the workers are probably similarly skilled. The machines are probably pretty much the same machines, right? So it makes sense that you'd have a constant opportunity cost, right? Remember, anything out here is impossible unless you get better workers or better machines or more workers or more cotton. Okay? Anything below is inefficient and you're underutilizing your resources, and anything on the curve is productively efficient. Is it allocatively efficient? We don't know. All right. If you're here, people might want more socks and say you're doing too many scarves. If you're here, people might say we're doing too many socks, not enough scarves. All right. But most of the time, again, it's not going to look like that. This again is not something I've seen on a FRQ. Right? Most of the time, there are increasing opportunity costs. So let's say apples and computers, right? Two pretty different items. Usually, it's going to look like that, okay? Because in order to the first computer, you don't sacrifice many apples, right? But once you're already all the way out here making computers, you're not getting that many more computers, and you're giving up a whole bunch of apples, okay? Because resources are usually not interchangeable. The same stuff you use to make an apple is not what you need to make computers. Like the farmer probably shouldn't be building your laptop, and the guy from the Geek Squad, you probably don't want farming and making your apples. Okay, what do we got here? This is your long run average total cost curve, right? And this is made up, again, I haven't seen this on a part two, but you never know. It's made up of a bunch of short run average total cost curves, right? So here's where you're trying to determine, right, in the long run, everything's interchangeable, or everything is more elastic, and all inputs are variable in the long run. So you can change everything: the size of your factory, the number of trucks, the things that it seems like would take a long time to change. You can change them all in the long run, right? So these are a whole bunch of individual ATCs making up your long run average total cost curve, which is where you have to decide, if I know I'm making this many, that's the decision I want to make. That's the best I can do. If I know I'm making this many, I want to be here. If I know I'm making this many, I want to be here. Right? One other thing with this, they could ask you, although again, I don't think so for this one. When we're talking economies of scale, okay, while your average total cost is coming down in the long run, you're enjoying what we call economies of scale, right? You put in 50% more of an input, you're going to get 51, 52, 53, somewhere above 50% more out, right? That's called economies of scale or increasing returns to scale. If you put in 50% more and get 50% more out, that's constant returns to scale, right? And if your costs are going up, you put in 50% more, but you only get 40% more out, that's diseconomies of scale, right? Or decreasing returns to scale, right? Again, it gets a little confusing because costs are going down, but you say increasing, and here costs are going up, and you say decreasing. So it does get a little annoying. But again, I've never seen one of those on part two. Okay, what do we got? Okay, this is regular old supply and demand. Okay, for whatever market, didn't put anything there. And what we've shown you is consumer and producer surplus. Consumer surplus, anything below demand but above price, in red. Producer surplus, anything below price but above supply. Okay, so you got green for producer surplus, your red for consumer surplus. Easy enough. Next. Okay, what do you see? You see Mr. Scanlon spill his coffee all over his dittos. That's just great. Okay, so you've seen total cost over, total revenue over marginal revenue. Okay, they'll show these one above the other. Okay, and the idea here is your total revenue continues to increase even though it's at a decreasing rate. Your marginal revenue continues on down, all right, until it hits zero, and then it goes negative, right? So you're making a little less. As long as it's positive, your total revenue continues to increase, and they'll show it to you matched up. So at this point right here, when it's zero, that's the maximum of your total revenue, and then your marginal revenue goes negative, and that starts pulling down your total revenue. Okay? Again, not something I've seen on a part two, but we should know. Okay, what do you have here? If you said a tax, you are correct. Okay, so what do we see? This is the impact of a tax. It's going to shift the supply curve to the left. That's one of your determinants of supply. In this case, what you also notice is that the demand is inelastic, the supply is relatively elastic. So you see that the burden falls much more on the consumers than the producers. Okay, so this is the original price. This is the new price paid by consumers, the new price received by producers. Right, so you can see that it's gone down just a touch for the producers, but it's gone up quite a bit for the consumers. Okay, between P2 or PC and PP, right? That's the actual amount of the tax. That's the tax wedge, right? The government is getting that much of a tax that many times. Okay, so they could show you the government revenue. The government revenue that comes from the producers would be that in purple. The government revenue, that's the producer tax incidence. The consumer tax incidence is this big box up here in black. And then the tax does cause mutually beneficial trades not to take place. Okay, so there's deadweight loss. That little touch of deadweight loss triangle here in blue that you can barely see is the deadweight loss that comes from the producers. And this triangle in red is the deadweight loss that comes from the consumer surplus. Okay, so amount of the tax times the quantity would be the black and purple area. That's government revenue from the tax. The black area is the consumer tax incidence. The purple area is the producer tax incidence. The red and blue is your deadweight loss, and there's a lot more red because there's a lot more deadweight loss coming from consumer surplus than there is from producer surplus. There you go. Hey, once again, what do you got? Okay, this one hopefully looks a little funky, but we've seen it. It is a monopsony. So this is like the reverse of a monopoly. Monopoly, one seller. Monopsony, one buyer. Okay, so the best example of this is the only firm in town that's hiring workers, like the local Walmart or coal mine or steel mill or whatever. They have some control over the wage rate. Okay, so the supply of labor, the marginal factor cost falls under it because to hire one more worker, I got to pay that worker more, and then I got to pay all my other workers more as well. So that's why your marginal factor cost curve falls above your supply curve. It's the reverse of monopoly, where you would have demand and marginal revenue falling under demand. Right? It's just the reverse of that, or the inverse of that. Okay, so because this firm has some power, right? Why do they demand labor? Because that labor produces a product for them, and they get revenue from that product, so marginal revenue product. And just like all of the things in economics, they're going to have their sweet spot where the marginal factor cost hits the benefit they get, and that's the marginal revenue product. But these guys have some power, so they're not going to accept that wage. they're going to drop the wage as low as they can. They're going to stick with that number, and they're going to go with the lowest wage they can. All right, if this was a perfectly competitive labor market, the price would be, or the wage would be here, and the quantity would be here. So just like a monopoly produces less quantity at a higher price than the perfectly competitive situation, the monopsony hires less labor at a lower wage. This again is a monopsony. We can play around with regulating the wage rate and the trade-off between how high you make that wage and how much labor will then not get hired. We can do that at another time. Or that's on another video somewhere. All right, again, what do we got? Okay, this is perfect competition, long run equilibrium. Okay, so this firm, individual firm, is just breaking even. Their total revenue is completely equal to their total cost because firms have had time to enter or exit the market, right, which moves Mr. Drop around for this firm. Okay, so again, if you need that, this pink in here is your total revenue and it's your total cost. This firm is just breaking even, right? Which matches up to the rest of the market. The rest of the market is our classic supply and demand. Why is the price what it is? Because this firm is just like every other firm in the market, right? In long run equilibrium. All right, so they've all got the same price. They're price takers. All right, so individual firm, whole market for whatever product you're talking about. Okay, again, what do you see? This is a monopoly that is practicing perfect price discrimination. How do I know? Because it says no deadweight loss. Right? So every single consumer was charged exactly the price of their willingness to pay, which means there is no consumer surplus, right? But there is also no deadweight loss. It's just that all that surplus goes to the producer. And also notice they're not producing at their sweet spot because they know exactly what each consumer is willing to pay. These guys, their willingness to pay is lower than the marginal cost of production for that firm, so they're not going to produce anywhere past that point. But notice that is the point of allocated efficiency. Okay, so that's the perfectly price discriminating monopoly. Okay, what do we got here? This is a perfectly competitive labor market. Okay, all the firms are the same. Nobody's giving out better wages or lower wages. Better wages, you'd be foolish. Lower wages, nobody's going to come work for you. Right? Again, why do we hire labor? Because they create a product and we get revenue from that product. So marginal revenue product decreasing, right? Each worker brings a little bit less. Those workers are all getting the same wage, so it's a flat line. Right? Marginal factor cost could be marginal resource cost, and that is the wage. That's the individual firm, and that firm is getting the same price as every other firm, so this is the market. Supply of labor, right? People their willingness to work, and demand for that labor. So again, this is really marginal factor cost, and that's marginal revenue product. Right? That is a perfectly competitive labor market. Okay, what do you think? This is some kind of imperfect competition, right? Most likely a monopoly. And because it says maximum price set where marginal cost hits demand, right? This is the monopoly being regulated to produce at the socially optimal, allocatively efficient point, right? Normally, this monopoly, if unregulated, would be producing this quantity here and jack the price up to here. Okay, but the government's not letting that happen. The ceiling is what stops me from going up. Okay, so this is a monopolist being regulated to produce at the socially optimal, allocatively efficient point where marginal cost hits demand, and if this was perfectly competitive, marginal revenue would be demand, and that's where they'd be at. So they're saying you can't go above that price. In this case, this monopolist would continue to produce, okay, because they're still making profits. Their profit would have been from here down to ATC and over. Now their profit is lower. Okay, it's from here down to ATC, right? So it's a smaller rectangle there, but they're still making profit. So this would be a case where regulation could work. Monopolists would be a little grumpy. People would be happier, but the monopolists would continue to produce. All right, take a look. Pretty similar, right? So this is again a monopolist, again being regulated. We see a maximum price, stops it from going up, so that's a ceiling. And in this case, it's not regulating them to be at the allocatively efficient spot. It's regulating them to get what we call a fair return. Right? So normally, this monopolist would produce here, jack up the price to there. Again, this is all about single price monopolists. We looked at the one for a price discriminating monopolist. Okay? So they'd be producing that quantity at that price. They're not making them take it all the way down to the allocatively efficient spot because they would probably just shut down in the long run because they're incurring a loss. Right? They'd be having a small loss, but they'd be losing that much each time they produce. Right? That would be the per unit loss. Okay? So instead, they're regulating them to produce where they're getting a fair return. They're just breaking even. Right? Everything that they produce is costing them exactly what those things are being sold for. So that again, that's a monopolist being regulated with a price ceiling set at the point at which they will get a fair return. I think that's about it. Let's go check my notes. Okay, what do you think? You already showed us this one, Scanlon. Yeah, I did. I was just looking at my notes, and we did total revenue over marginal revenue. Okay, but this could also be total utility over marginal utility, or it could be total product over marginal product. It's all the same idea, right? The idea that it continues to increase, but at a decreasing rate. Your total product, the total output of your workers, your inputs, your resources, right? And the marginal continues to decline, right? But it's still positive until you hit that maximum point of total product. That's where your marginal product or utility or whatever you're talking about is zero. And after that, it's negative, which is why your total product starts to decrease. Again, that's the point where think about all the chefs, the pizza cooks, and the pizzeria, right? That's the point at which there are so many chefs that they start bumping into each other and dropping pizza, and customers are walking out, and you hired way too many, and now it's you're making even less than you were before. Okay. Again, I'm pretty sure that's it. I'm going to take one more quick look at my notes. Oh yeah, there's one more thing we got to do. Okay, what is this one? This one should be you going into tomorrow's exam. All right. We just went through like 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 12, like 21 different important concepts. Maybe not 21 curves or whatever, but 21 really important ideas. Actually, there's one more place I want to look. Give me one second. Okay, last thing, just real quick. Again, a lot of this stuff I haven't seen on part twos, but so here again, we're talking about total product. So in the early stages of production, yeah, your marginal products, it is usually going to increase because of specialization and whatnot. So your total product is increasing at an increasing rate. Then once diminishing marginal returns set in, your marginal product starts to decrease, right? So your total product continues to increase, but at a much decreased rate. That's why it's flattened out. And then it matches up once your marginal product goes negative, then that starts bringing your total product down. Okay? So once again, The important one that we end with is you before the exam going, bring it on. And maybe your face looks a little better. Let's do this. All right. Um, okay, so I'm just going to review this quick, make sure I didn't say anything completely ridiculous or incorrect, and then post it. And I'm pretty much dedicating the rest of my day today and anything before 4 p.m. tomorrow to you guys. All right. I gave my global kids something to work on until tomorrow at midnight. I have one Google Meet with an AP seminar student tomorrow. But if anybody wants to do a one-on-one Google Meet, or a couple of you want to get together and discuss something on a Google Meet, just let me know and I'll set it up. Any certain topic that you want some clarification on, links to other videos about, whatever, please check out Mr. Clifford, the everything you need to know for the micro exam. It's a great video. Like I said, listen to it while you're just doing other things around the house and let it seep into your brain. Go back and watch some of our videos. Look at those practice free response questions. Again, tomorrow, have the cheat sheet, have the hopefully what you just, all the sketches you just took with some notes on them, right? Have a calculator there. Make sure everything is fully charged and ready to go, right? Have whatever notes you think are important, maybe some of the topics where you feel like you're always forgetting something or always flip-flopping your elasticity calculations, and a big note on the back of the wall that says marginal cost equals marginal revenue is what you want to do. Whatever you think, guys, but you should be in real good shape for this one. But like I said, I'm pretty much, you're all I'm thinking about between now and the exam. So I'm going to go through some old PowerPoints that I stole from people, and just look at a couple other places, make sure there's nothing we forgot, or there's nothing that I think would be like a really good reminder or practice or whatever. So I can't promise that this is the last time you'll hear from me today. If I find something, I'm going to post it. But if I don't get back to you guys first and you need something or you want something, again, a Google Meet, a refresher on any certain topic, please don't hesitate. Let me know. Don't worry about the makeup work right now. You'll have plenty of time to make up all the work. If you're still taking the exam, worry about getting ready for that exam. Getting I would say get a good night's sleep, but the thing ain't till 4 o'clock. All right. So we should be in good shape. Let me know if you need anything.